Welcome back to the We the Patriots podcast. It has been a couple of weeks since I've been on here, and things have not gone totally crazy, which part of me says I'm surprised, part of me doesn't. We're going to get to talking today about how things have gone. I'm not going to do a total recap. You have tons of other shows to go get all the news and the latest, but what I'm going to talk about today is pressing need, in my opinion, for a new political structure and or political party in the United States. We're going to be talking about how the United States and its voting bloc, we the people, can get to a place where we are voting for our own interests and getting people in, and how we get people out that are either focused entirely on their own well-being and their upward trajectory, or they're focused on other countries' interests. I am your host, Sal Sante. This is the We the Patriots podcast, and let's get right into it. So while I was gone, I think we really have two pretty big events, quote unquote, that have happened. One, of course, is the continuing of the tariffs levied by Trump and his administration, and the other being the crackdown in D.C., authorized by the President of the United States. We'll talk a little bit about both of those, and then we'll talk about why I would be calling for a new political party. And I am not talking about a Elon Musk-led America party, because I think that is a fallacy. So let's talk first about tariffs. I've talked about this multiple times in the past, but if you want deep insight, learning how tariffs work, all that and the other, hey, there's tons of economic professionals that are not me that can probably go through it a little bit better, but you can also go look at my other episodes where I try to give a brief overview for layman people like us, like me. In short, tariffs are a further tax on the people of the United States. They are not actually harming the other countries unless Americans refuse to buy the products. Why I think that President Trump is not going at the tariffs correctly is kind of a twofold thing. Number one, if you're going to be implementing tariffs and looking at them to bolster the inflow of tax revenue into the federal treasury of the United States, and you actually think that is a viable term, the goal would not be to lay tariffs on top of the existing tax structure. It would actually be to take back some of the overreaching themes, I would say, of the tax structure in the United States. You see people getting double taxed, triple taxed, even more than that on the same exact money, whether you're talking about income tax, sales tax, property tax, state tax, a whole plethora of different taxes that we have to pay here as citizens in the United States, and that, in my opinion, are very unjust. So one way that it is failing, I would say, on behalf of the Trump administration is that there is no repealing of other taxes. The big, beautiful bill that is being signed into law, if not already, is going to be. It doesn't actually repeal taxes. It doesn't actually set forth any savings. It codifies the savings from the original tax cuts in 2017. Could be wrong on the year there, but at the end of the day, all it is reenshrining these things. Whether you're talking about no tax on tip, no tax on overtime, these have very low bars to be broken. And once you reach these bars, you are now going to be continued to be taxed. And not only that, these campaign promises are caveated with the fact that you still have to pay payroll taxes on these incomes, whether you're talking about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. These taxes don't go away. So I have an issue with that implementation. The other implementation that I have an issue with when you're talking about tariffs specifically is that if you are looking to do what Trump claims to be and what he has claimed throughout all of his election processes, is that he's looking to bring jobs back to America. If you are looking to bring jobs back to America in combination with tariffs, you are going to have to put together a package for employers in the United States to either receive tax benefits or to basically prompt the building of businesses here in the United States. You can't just slap a tax on everybody for buying the product, which again is not really hurting the people unless we stop buying it. It's hurting the American citizen and their purchasing power. So at the end of the day, the whole way that I see Trump going after tariffs and utilizing them as a strategy, it's really just adding another layer of tax to the United States citizens. And there's really only a certain amount that we can handle before the economy stops functioning. So there's that, and it's my issues with that. He's going to do these 90-day pauses and whatnot and all this. And at the end of the day, where you see the most economic growth, and especially when you're talking about the stock market and stocks going up, which Granted, I have talked about many times that the stock market is not the economy. However, when you look at the stock market gains and a decent way of gauging whether there's confidence in the market, the gains come from when he pauses tariffs. They don't come from when he's instituting tariffs. And I think that's plain as day to see that your policy is not generating the outcome that you are looking for it to generate. Now let's move on to the other kind of big story, I think. I'm going to kind of throw gerrymandering out to the side. There is, for anybody curious, pretty big verbal spat going on between Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and prospective 2028 presidential candidate for the Democrats, and Donald Trump. I don't really feel like getting into it. I think that Gavin Newsom doesn't deserve even the position that he has now, let alone to be considered a serious candidate for the presidency. But again, going to leave that to the side. I think a more important issue to talk about is the Capitol Police and what has been going on in DC. So I have not done a ton of research on this. I'm kind of just giving my initial thoughts on what has happened. And I think there's a couple of things that are important to keep in mind. Number one, this is an issue. The inability to police or the lack of policing and justice in the DC area has been a topic for years, if not decades. The fact of the matter is that there is a mayor of DC and there is local politicians, but at the end of the day, it also falls on the Congress to, if they were to take their powers fully and institute them, they have the ability to create laws and to institute a better policing of the area, and they have not done so. So with that in mind, and also the fact that DC area in and of itself is kind of just a cesspool, keeping these two things in mind, I think it broadens the picture as to why Donald Trump and his administration might have taken the action that they've taken. You know, whether you're bringing in National Guard units, whether you are actually holding the police and police chiefs accountable for actions that they're taking to either not prosecute and go after criminals, or just actually doing their job, generally speaking, to keep the place clean, to keep the place livable. And especially when you have federal politicians, congressmen, senators, living in the area basically year round. It is a problem if you are to invite foreign actors into your nation's capital, and your nation's capital is a shithole. So I actually applaud the effort being taken by the Trump administration, how they've gone about it, and utilizing Capitol Police and utilizing National Guard units to do so. Kind of the same thing that happened in California. You're not really integrating with the local politics, and you're not integrating with the local police, and you are just kind of coming in from above. You're going to have some issues. Now, one of the biggest criticisms that you'll see online is that he is essentially acting as if he's Mussolini, as if he's Hitler, using paramilitary groups, and that is just not true. Obviously, the groups of people being utilized from an enforcement standpoint are not paramilitary. They are either National Guard units, which are military units in and of themselves, or Capitol Police, or whoever they are. They're not paramilitary. So that's just a ridiculous criticism. Now, again, the issue that I think could be brought very substantially is that this power being wielded is not necessary when there are police units that could be threatened with losing their jobs, losing their incomes if they're not going to perform their duties. And that is where the Congress actually could step in and not really need the President of the United States and take some of that burden away from Trump having to make a decision. They haven't done that. They haven't done that in decades. And I think that kind of promotes Donald Trump and his administration to do something. And they have chosen this path of action. And to be honest, it seems to be doing something. Is it doing what he wants? I'm not really sure. Is it doing everything that he could? Probably not. Again, I think the most sustainable thing would be getting those in-place policemen and police chiefs off their ass, get them to do their job that they are clearly not doing or not doing to their fullest extent, and get them to do it. That would perpetuate a cycle of cleaning up the area rather than letting it fall into further decay. Now I want to talk about what I really wanted to talk about today. Given all of the idiocy that has come out of the Trump White House this year, given all of the craziness that has come from the Democratic Party and a lot of independent thinking people, whether you're talking about people like Bernie Sanders or anybody like this, the lunacy on both sides has become to a point where, you know, I think a lot of somewhat intelligent people, intelligent speakers have been calling for a third party, or at least someone to be taken seriously as a third party for quite some time now. But I think now is the time where we have, as the American people, been put in front of so much information that goes to show that either DC politicians, our presidents, or elected officials just really don't care about either commitments that they've made, promises that they've made, or they don't really care about their constituents whatsoever. Whether you're talking about the president of the United States going on and pushing this tariff war that is continuously hurting people economically, and whether it affects you or not is a different story. Whether you're talking about the people that are pushing for making their own money rather than pushing for their constituents to grow. You're talking about people like Nancy Pelosi, Dan Crenshaw, Chuck Schumer, Lindsey Graham. A lot of these people who have been long-time elected officials have really only done what suits their own best interests and does not suit the interests of their constituents and their voter bloc. Now, what do I think it takes to solve this? What do I think it takes to get this kind of rot out of politics? Well, I think it actually takes a third party. I don't think that the Republican Party, especially now that Trump has essentially turned it into the Trump party. It has become a much more populist party. It has become something that is not a solid frame and doesn't have values that they actually stand on. I do not think that party can be manipulated in order to be made truly America first. Now, people like Trump and Trump's cabinet will call America First program made by Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, when you look at it on the whole, the amount of times that Israel has been clearly above and beyond what the American citizens receive, whether you're talking about actual aid, whether you're talking about his willingness to commit to a war against Iran with really faulty evidence, really no evidence to speak of, or whether you're talking about something as silly as what came out in recent weeks where Trump was threatening to withhold disaster aid for any areas that had outspoken officials that spoke against Israel. That is not a good look. And you can make this case for a number of countries, people that would rather do business with China than someone that is in our orbit or is more of an ally, people that would rather go to a place like Ukraine with funding rather than help out our own cities in America that are struggling. Or whether you're talking about doling out millions and millions, if not billions of dollars through U.S. aid to countries that really have no real tie to the United States, instead of helping out our own struggling, starving children, people in cities that are lacking good education opportunities or opportunities in general just to get out of a bad situation. And of course, not to mention the massive amount of incarcerated individuals that we have in the United States, some of which deserve to be there and some of which definitely don't. Whether you're talking about retroactive laws that have been changed and people are still there, or whether you're talking about something completely different where it is maybe we are sentencing the wrong type of criminals to massive sentences. All of these things should be taken into account, I think, but there's a lot more when you're talking about an America First person, and you're definitely not going to get it from the Republicans, nor are you going to get it from Democrats. Democratic people, at the end of the day, Democratic elected officials, I should say, and a lot of the voter bloc are of the belief that if you tax the American people enough, you can utilize that money and spend it well enough to help out the people on the bottom or people who are struggling. And time again, especially on a broader scale, I'm not talking about Nordic countries, not talking about very isolated individuals who may have populations that are less than a lot of our states. If you take those examples out, and you're also talking about many places that are not multi-ethnic, not multicultural, and you take those out of the examples, whenever you talk about higher rates of government spending and government taxation, you're talking about a less prosperous nation, a lower ability for the people to thrive, for the people to take that American idea of jumping up into another tax bracket by the time that you are done with your working career, right? Starting as lower class, ending as a middle class, or maybe even upper class, starting as a middle class and jumping to the upper class. That ability gets taken away as you start to take more and more money from the people, whether you're talking about an income tax, a property tax, a state tax, any taxes that are lowering the ability of first-time home buyers or first-time business owners. These are ways that we make the next generations weaker and weaker in terms of economics. So when you think about it, or when I like to think about America on the whole and how this place could get better, I think we need to get away from the two-sided system that we have and have someone else who is not arguing about things from the perspective that our elites have been doing so for so long. I don't remember exactly where this comes from. One of the broad points that's brought up about the fact of our two-party system is that they actually generally agree on a lot of things. You might have your headline issues, something like abortion, gun rights, property ownership, taxation levels, and whatnot. You might have these different things that they actually differ on in stance, maybe even 180 degrees backwards from each other. But at the end of the day, when they're passing laws, when they're getting things truly done politically, these solutions are very, very similar. And it makes you think that it's very possible that this group of people do not really have the best interest of Americans at heart and have the best interest of themselves getting reelected or continuing their political career without stepping foot into a possible landmine. What does America First mean to me? Well, there's some things that I think it would be very proper and very noble for the next generation of politicians to do and to actually get out in front of and take a stab at. As I'd already mentioned in this year's show, is being less manipulatable by outside sources, whether you're talking about other countries, other movements, being able to do what is right no matter who is telling you otherwise. And you're not going to get that from Republicans or Democrats. Both parties themselves are constantly lobbied by other forces, again, outside of the nation or big movements or a combination of both. And at the end of the day, if that is allowed to happen, if people are taking bribes, if people are taking deals that help them individually and are not thinking about their constituents, well, then they are not really for the American people and definitely not for their constituents if they are someone like a congressman that is voted in by their district. They don't care. And I think that it would take another type of thinking in order to get away from that. I do not think you're going to find that in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. Another thing is that spending whatever money we are generating on our own people rather than going outside of it, rather than spending on other nations while we're struggling, I think is a massive deal. And if anything, what could also be made an argument, which I think should be made an argument, is that, well, we keep taking money away from our individuals in the United States. How about we stop doing that? How about we actually lower the taxes in order to prevent the ability to overspend overseas when we do not really have any need? And if anything, the need is being called for at home here, whether you're talking about cities that need to be rebuilt, roads all across the country, whether you're talking about rail that needs to be upgraded, which we have not really had upgrades in decades. There are so many different places that our money can be spent if we're going to continue to take it from the taxpayer. Well, maybe if we're just going to continue to do things the way that we're doing, maybe we can cut the ability of Congress and the president to spend money abroad and not allow that to continue. Again, I do not think that's going to come from the Republicans or the Democrats. I think this is going to have to be another party. Another thing that I think is very important at some point to be tackled, some point soon and not kicked down the road anymore, is Social Security. As I think most of you are aware, Social Security is a broken system. It is not like you pay into Social Security and you have an account dedicated to your name. Every dollar that we, as the American workers, get taxed, either from our end or from our employer's end from Social Security, goes directly to a Social Security recipient today. There is no ability for that money to grow. There is no ability to have whatever you put in given back out to you. And instead, it is an arbitrary number that is based off of the current living standard that you may or may not have paid into the system. And that is just not fair. And at the end of the day, as we've been told, or at least I have been told since a young child, is that there's a good chance that the Social Security system is not going to be functioning whatsoever by the time I am looking to be a participant in getting my money back. So with that being said, I think the system needs to end, and someone needs to have the stomach and the gall to go ahead with that decision, even though it will not be popular, especially among certain voter blocs. That is something that's not going to come from the Republicans or the Democrats. They receive a lot of their paychecks on the back of taking money from Social Security. Another thing that goes quite well alongside that is government-funded healthcare. The honest fact about government-funded healthcare is that it has not worked. Ever since the institution by Barack Obama, prices of premiums and medicine and all types of healthcare have skyrocketed. They have not come down one iota. Not only that, there is a principle, an American principle that is not talked about much anymore that I think is very much needed in this scenario. And that is the fact that you are not entitled to someone else's labor. And that is why socialized healthcare is not a proper ideal. Now, it may make sense again in some of those Nordic countries or very unicultural systems. But when you are a multicultural, multi-ethnic state like the United States, it just does not work. Too many people have different goals, have different ways of living. I have different problems, whether you're working in a city or you are a factory worker or whether you work in an office and you have air conditioning all day long. Say. I know those are just two random examples, but you got to think about the life trajectory of someone who is, say, a union welder and someone who is just an office numbers guy. There are going to be two very different life expectancies, and the problems that they're going to be dealing with health wise are going to be very, very different. You cannot tell me that everybody has one price to pay for health insurance. And by that token, you cannot tell somebody that this is the price we're willing to pay. That is the problem with government run healthcare. It's the problem with government run anything. When you try to dictatorially come out and say that this is the price of any good or service, well, that's not taking into account anything that talks about market dynamics, whether you're talking about scarcity, the demand, talk about the amount of people that actually need to participate in it. There's a whole different amount of people that need to buy food as compared to the amount of people that need healthcare on a day-to-day basis. It's just a fact. And to say that, in someone like Zohran Mamdani's case of wanting to have a government-run grocery store and be able to arbitrate what the price of goods is going to be, comes off the same way as someone trying to tell you that the price of healthcare should be X, when in reality, you're not taking into account, whether this person is dealing with diabetes or whether they're dealing with brain cancer, whether they are dealing with needing a major surgery, or whether they're talking about just getting some medicine for either a chronic illness or something that they're dealing with right now that'll be done in a month. There are too many different factors that get played in, and there's a lot of hereditary issues that come up that may make one family's insurance be more expensive than another person's. And at the end of the day, you saying that you have the right to tell the doctor what they are to be expected to be paid, well, that kind of throws away the whole point that that person went to school for 8 years and then got a residency for 3 years and is now in oogles of debt unless they had a massively successful family that paid for everything, and they now need to pay that debt off. I think that it's important for us as Americans to get away from that idea that it is on the working class to support the people that don't work, whether you're talking about people who are retired, people who are disabled. And a lot of that comes back to actually getting back to an American ideal that is centered around faith, and that is that faith communities, on the whole, in most cases, bore out by many studies, are much better and much more efficient at doling out money from the community in order to cover gaps where either you have disabled people, you have retired people, you have people who are in need. They're much more efficient rather than the government. Government always finds, when looking at the government, you always find people who are taking advantage, people who are trying to just strain out a little bit for themselves, take a little bit off the top. And at the end of the day, I think it's important to get back to original American values in that facet as well. Now, I'm going to lay out another unpopular thing that I think is important for this pie in the sky ideal of another party. And I think that, between this and Social Security, this might be an extremely unpopular party just off the get-go, but I think it's important to come at it the right way. And that is the fact of we are seeing a degradation in our society revolving gambling, and specifically sports gambling. I think that it was a much better place in the United States when sports gambling was illegal on the whole. Of course, you always had Las Vegas, you have places in Atlantic City where you can go and play sports bets. But on the whole, in whatever it is now, 37, 43 states that it's legal, that did not exist. It was not easy to be a sports bettor. It was not easy to gamble every single day or have an app on your phone that you can waste your life savings away on. And I think that it is important for us to recognize, I have way too many anecdotal stories, and I'm not going to rehash here, but the ability of people to waste their entire either life savings or waste their entire paycheck to paycheck on gambling is not a good thing. And it is actually going against the ability of Americans to climb up to that next rung of society that we always look for when you're talking about a healthy American culture and society. When you have the ability to say you're going to pick the Minnesota Vikings to win on this day and you're going to bet your whole paycheck on it and someone gets hurt, think about the ramifications that it has. Number one, you're going to struggle to eat that week. Number two, you can get violent. If you are the person betting that money, you are now insecure. You have the financially insecure in that matter. You feel wronged. If the bet was made with massive odds in your favor and you still lost and you lost money, you could be threatening the players or the people that did not succeed in the way that you thought they would. And there have been countless cases at this point of people being threatened for not doing whatever the sports book analysts thought they would do, whether you're talking about them getting threatened or even their own families and children being threatened. And I think that on the whole, what this has done, this specific thing has done in gambling and specifically sports betting, what it has done to our culture is it has taken us back a pretty significant way down the ladder in terms of climbing to a better place to be. Now, a lot of people in my generation are fond of blaming older generations for their inability to purchase things, and a lot of them are afraid to look in the mirror and take a little blame on themselves and take it on the chin. I think that this is one example. And I think that a real pro-America party, a new party that would be created, would actually be anti-sports gambling. The fact of the matter is that you see sports gambling ads everywhere and gambling ads in general everywhere. They're on almost every YouTube channel that has ads. They are on tons of different websites and all over every sport you watch, news channel, all of this. And it is so ingrained in the culture at this point, and it is scary to think that this is where a lot of people are spending their money, and the people that are promoting this are getting very wealthy. The politicians that are involved in passing these laws are almost certainly getting kickbacks on the side for them voting for these policies. And you have to think that it is not proper for us to continue this way as a nation. Now, when you look back on it as a whole and all of the things that I've mentioned, there are even more examples, whether you want to talk about home buying and disallowing large corporations from buying homes, whether you're talking about setting up, if you're going to run something like a Social Security, setting up a program where you are actually allowing people to have dedicated accounts and allow for growth in those accounts. There are a number of ways to tackle this and the problems that I'm bringing up in different ways with different tactics. But at the end of the day, if we are unable to, as the American people, to get representatives that are looking out for our best interests as Americans, whether you're talking about on the lookout of what tax looks like, what our frontage looks like to other nations and other peoples and groups, and whether you're talking about actually putting forth policy, something like gambling, being anti-gambling, when in fact it's going to be unpopular, but when anecdotally sure, that it will be better for the nation if it is brought to pass that gambling should not be allowed. Any number of these things and combine them into a movement that is truly America first, I think will be the only way for us to see ourselves succeed as a nation. If we are going to continue to be that country that is viewed not only around the world, but even internally as the people that will always capitulate on their values in order for the next dollar to flow their way. If we're going to continue to be those people that if you sell the story enough, you will get funding, or if we're going to continue to be those people that do not actually have any core values and are approaching things from a manner of, well, this seems popular today and we're going to run it this way and we're not going to hold true to something that we believe to be right, we will continue to see our way of life and our culture degrade year after year and decade after decade until we are no longer a preeminent power in the world. Now, I, for one, am someone who promotes American excellency, and I think that we are an incredible nation, especially if we abide by our Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and all things that make America what America is supposed to be. The more that we stray from that, and the more that we have an inability to recognize that we are nothing like our founding fathers, and that is not a good thing, I think we will continue to see ourselves slide. And how I think I want to end this conversation with you guys, the viewers, is with a question. If you were to be living in the 18th century when we are turning against Britain, we have gone through so much, whether you're talking about the Boston Massacre, whether you're talking about the taxation that led up for decades after the 7 Years' War, or French and Indian War, depending on where you're looking at it from, and you see yourself in that movement, do you believe that you would be on the fighting side that's fighting against the crown. My contention is that whether you're willing to admit it or not, a high percentage of us would either sit by and do nothing, or we would be actually on the side of loyalists fighting for the crown because we are comfortable with the norm. And I think that could also be said for the multitude of our existing politicians, starting at the top and running all the way down to the local level. If you are on that side, I implore you to maybe think about some of the arguments that I put forth today. Think about some of the things I brought up. Give me your arguments against, or why you think that we should remain to be taxed as high as we should, why you think that we should continue to look out for other countries' interest higher on the value sheet than our own, or why something like gambling, especially when talking about something like sports, is so necessary. I would love to hear your comments. I would love to see what you guys have to say about this, but at the end of the day, what I'm vouching for is that we need to have a turn of the tides, and I do not think it's going to happen in the Democratic or the Republican. I love you all. I'm glad to be back, and we will be back next week with another show. I'm your host, Sal Asante, Be the Patriots Podcast. I'm out.
I wish I were the fucking state. I wanna be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream, and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.